love the way she says action. Olivia, it's really lovely to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Also, it's been a while since like our paths crossed.
Yes.
So it's exciting to get to talk about the work you do, and especially from the perspective of somebody who's been part of the work you do at some earlier point, and then now you're like out doing all these incredible things.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it's really good to be here.
Bless. So maybe you can kind of introduce yourself and tell the folks who don't know you yet, because they're gonna know you, what you do.
So my name is Olivia Ambani. I'm a singer-songwriter and marketing consultant. I create music that I love and that I hope other people will love as well. And I also help businesses grow their brands through social media and digital marketing.
That's incredible.
Thank you.
I really hope when we put up this video, we're gonna have like a cutaway of your incredible video that you did with Empower. Yeah,
I hope so.
Yeah, and use your songs as well, because they're really, really beautiful. And I think I've told you this before. I think your songs have this cinematicness. And I'm sure people come and tell you that.
Yes, they do. It's also because I love film music. I'm actually hoping to do an album that's just dedicated to film music. I feel like it's really nice to take people on a journey. And for me with music, it's about soundtracks. I feel like they're soundtracks to your life or soundtracks to something. So I'm really happy that was a connection you got from my music.
Do you know that? Like, I've just had this thought. Like, a lot of people have been talking about romanticizing life. I feel like your music does that really strongly, because like this idea of like a lot of people are just kind of moving through life, and like I have a friend who likes accusing me of not having soundtracks, because like for her she's always listening to music all the time, and then like for me I listen during very specific times. And so like when people are talking about this romanticizing of life, I think having a soundtrack and a personal soundtrack, and like always knowing this is the song I would play for this, or that's very much part of that sort of heavy romance. And I feel like your music does that really strongly.
And I think it's because it's part of my life. Like literally when I'm walking, I'm like, I have a playlist for different things, for travel, for fitness, for just pretty much anything. So I think that kind of came through when I was creating my music. I like just wanted playlists basically with my music.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to that. The film music album, definitely.
Thank you.
I think today we're here to talk about your digital media marketing, and maybe you can tell us how you kind of decided to get started, not necessarily being in digital media for yourself, even though you have to do that for your work as a musician, but doing this for others.
Yeah, I mean, it actually started, almost 10 plus years ago.
Wow.
So I was looking for work, and I got an internship at a fashion house called Kiko Romeo, and they needed someone to do graphic design. So I started doing that. But when I was there, I saw like they needed someone to run their Facebook page. So I was like, hey, I know what to do. Well, I was kind of figuring it out on the job. And I loved creating content. So I had just gotten a little digital camera. So I used to take pictures all the time. And that's literally how I got into like digital marketing. And I remember when I was there, we did the first kind of live sort of event. So there was no live at that point in time. So what we did was we'd take pictures of the event, and then we'd run to the computer and basically post them. So people would get the feeling of being at an event live.
Wow.
So I really enjoyed coming up with different concepts, and I just felt marketing came naturally to me because it made sense in my mind. I'm like, this is how you make people connect to what you're doing. And I liked the freedom I got when I was there, because the founder, Anne McCreth, was really open to you having ideas and putting them forward. So then I think that's when I really developed the knack for marketing, seeing how you can make people connect with your brand, and then using social media, because it was just rising at that point in time. Facebook, I think, had been out for just maybe 2-3 years. And then Twitter was just, I think, in the beginning stages. So that's how I got into like digital marketing. And then every time I'd go to a different company, they'd always need someone to do it. So I wasn't necessarily always hired for it. I'd be hired for something else, but then they'd need someone to do it. And then I kind of knew what to do. So that's how I got into it. And then over the years, I realized I really enjoyed it. So I decided to just specialize in it more as a consultant. And that's how I kind of ended up actually even working with you guys in HEVA. I came for an event, helped with that, stayed on for a couple of years, and then decided I really wanted to focus on my own projects. And I started to work with lots and lots of other businesses. And I felt for me, the niche specifically with small businesses was so important, because I felt that people were ignoring them. Most companies were looking for like big corporates to give digital marketing to, but I felt that I connected more to small businesses because I'd mainly worked with small businesses.
And because like kind of in digital media, you were a small business too.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think also having used the skills that I had for myself, I got the understanding of how it feels to basically have to run your own social media as well as have another job, right? And so I connected to that part of small businesses and entrepreneurs, and I felt I want to serve them. I want to give them the skill set that I have. And so that's how I got into doing what I'm doing right now.
There's a thing I think, and this is a conversation I think we've had before about how do you get people to jump over that initial reluctance to put yourself out there, because here you are, you're a small business, you ideally have a great product, or also because social media is what it is. If the product has holes, you're going to find out because people will tell you. Right? So there's a lot of fear in that kind of initial publicness, because people are like, oh, am I showing off? So how do you get people to just kind of go through that first hurdle, because it's a very big one?
Yeah, I think the first thing I do is I don't even address social media. I address you, the person, because a lot of the things we're doing are based on our mindset and how we perceive things. So I actually talk the client through what is it that you're actually afraid of. And most of it is based on fear that they saw someone else go through a negative experience, so they don't want to put themselves out there. So chances of that happening are really slim, but we project other people's negativity onto ourselves. So I normally tell them, I understand the fear is valid, but why don't we look at what you could gain if you were on social media? And when you look at the advantages and the things that you can get from being on social media, and you focus more on that than the fear of what could go wrong, I feel that that sets their mindset up to being able to be open to the conversation of going onto social media. Then the next step is I ask them, what social media platform are they on already? Because I feel it's important to start where you're comfortable. I know it's the opposite of what most people are told, but start where you're comfortable and then move slowly out of your comfort zone. Because I find when you push people too quickly, two things can happen. They could either fly and be like, this is fantastic, or they're like, forget it, I'm never doing this again. So I found most people, when you take them from their level of comfort and slowly move them outside that comfort zone, they're more likely to be sustainable and to stay on social media longer. So I say, what social media platform are you more familiar with? Let's start with that one. Especially if you already have a personal social media, then let's start talking about your brand there. You already have people who like you, who follow you, who probably would support you. So start at that point and get familiar with actually promoting yourself. And then now we can evaluate maybe what other social media platform makes better sense for your brand. So maybe you're on Facebook, but it's better sense for you to be on Twitter, on Instagram. Then we start developing that.
How do you find that process is of like convincing people? Because it seems like a lot of your job is convincing people to do things that they haven't done before, which is really difficult, because like especially with adulthood, you've just kind of gone through this wild childhood, especially like if you're Kenyan or if you're African or if you're Black, where people just used to tell you what to do.
Yes.
And so you're like now in a place where you're making your own decisions. And then along comes this Olivia with all of her suggestions for your life. So like, how do you kind of manage people through that? It can be a difficult emotional process.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think emotional intelligence is really important in the work we do, and being aware that everyone is at a different level. It's not good or bad. We're just at the different stages. And so one of the first things I try and do is remove shame. Like, I'm very specific when working with clients. I don't really allow shame as much as possible. So we are all at where we are, and that's fine. There's no good or bad, it's fine. So that's the first thing, because I feel like there's a lot of shame around, oh, how can you not be on social media? Or how come you don't have this many followers? Or how can you not know that? And even when we were being taught, I'm sure most of us in school, you were shamed for not knowing, or you were told, how can you not understand that? So that for me is very important, to kind of remove the shame in the space when I'm working with people, so that they feel open to tell me, okay, I want to try, but this is what I'm afraid of. Because once I know what they're actually afraid of, then we can deal with the actual issue, and we can help them go step by step. So I think the first thing is removing shame, to creating an environment where they feel open enough to share that, okay, I'm afraid about this, but I actually am willing to try. And then the third one is affirming. So I do my best to affirm my clients and say, look, I do believe you can do it. I believe in you. Are you willing to believe in yourself? And let's just take one step at a time so that we can get to the place I know you can. And I feel a lot of times people just have either forgotten or never did believe in themselves, or just didn't have someone directly affirm them and say, you can actually do it. It might be at a different pace, at a different journey. You have everyone has their own journey, and that's perfectly fine. And I think creating that environment then makes them less resistant to what I'm trying to tell them, and they listen to, okay, so what can we achieve together? Yeah.
And I think another thing people don't really realize about creatives is that so much work goes just into the making of the thing.
Yeah.
And then the marketing of the thing is such a different thing. And then now you start worrying because you're like, I don't have the skills to market the thing. All I know is how to make it. Exactly. All of this other marketing stuff is like just a lot, and it's scary, and I don't want to think about it. Is that a thing that you find is common?
I do. And I feel it's because a lot of times people have convinced themselves that they're not good at something.
Right.
So they're like, I don't know money, or I don't know how to do social media. Like, they're convinced. But most of the times I tell them, if you can come up with an idea and you can convince someone that what you're doing is good, it's the same skill set for social media or even for money, right? But it's just helping people apply that same principle on a different platform, and helping them play to their strengths. So say, for instance, you're not comfortable being in front of video. I personally would never force a client to do video. I would say, okay, so let's start with images or graphics or something. Let's start where you're comfortable. And then let's see if maybe you're willing to do like a video where you're not talking, but you're just moving or showing people what you do. Right? So I think the first thing is making people feel really comfortable and showing them that they actually can do it. And even if they feel like a bit resistant, let's see, what about it can you do? So maybe you're great at writing poetry, and maybe speaking, right? But you don't like speaking to camera. So then we'll use your voice, and we can use images of something else or some other thing, but we can still get the point across.
And that there's always an option.
There is always an option. And also, especially when you're working with creatives, I tell them, bring that creativity you have with your work onto social media. And I find that people connect with brands where you're being yourself, you're being authentic, especially when you're creative. So I tell them, you don't have to be like someone else. Who you are is enough. Let's try and bring part of what you do in your creative work onto social media in your marketing work.
Have you met people who are determined not to be online and not to be on the internet? And that's probably maybe part of how they've decided that they want to market themselves. And if so, how would you advise them? Not necessarily convincing them that they have to be on socials or they have to be online, but then what do they have to put into their marketing? Because digital is such an important part of working now, but then there's some people who maybe it's even part of their brand to be anti-digital.
Yeah.
Do you come across these people?
I have, and I think with them then I meet them where they are, because again, I've had some difficult conversations with people. I'm like, okay, if it's not bringing you joy, there's no point of me forcing you to do this thing, because it's just going to be resistant all the way. So what we do is we look for other options. So for instance, if it's possible to do like physical events, I know with COVID and everything, it's thrown things all over the place. But if you can do a physical event, then let's see how we can do that. And then some people maybe are opposed to social media, but are open to other forms of digital media. So there's newsletters. So it's really important for us generally, whether you're on social media or not, to collect people's contact details. So you could use that. Right? Have like a newsletter that you send out every so often.
Have a WhatsApp channel or something.
Yes, a WhatsApp channel. Using the WhatsApp stories is actually a really powerful tool, because most of the people who have your number, you probably have their number. So WhatsApp stories is something people tend to overlook. But if you use that, you'll be surprised at how much you convert. And then also having a website. Having a home where people can find you. And that's something that I personally am even investing in the future, having my own website, because you don't want to just depend on all these other platforms that other people own. You want to have a home that people can come to that's yours. So I would say then let's invest in your website and find a way to have your creativity expressed there, and then using Google Ads and SEO to make sure that your website gets the attention it needs.
Do you think, of course you think that people can learn how to do their own socials.
Yes.
And so what do you think are like the first steps for someone who's like, okay, fine, I'm willing to do this thing, but I can't pay Olivia. So then how do I learn?
So there are tons of different ways to learn. So I personally have like a lot of free content. So I run this series every Monday that's called Marketing Mondays. So people
Marketing Mondays. Yes, talk about that.
So people can tune into that. So every Monday I share a different tip in marketing, mainly around digital media, but I do also touch on other types of marketing. So they can tune into that. It's on my Instagram page. Hopefully we'll move on to my YouTube page. But yeah, they can tune into that and get lots of free content and tips. And there are also lots of other people that I also follow that do the same. So there's this amazing lady called Vanessa Lau. She does specifically for Instagram. And if you're like a business coach, how you can grow. There's also a lady called Vivian Okafor. She's a content strategist, has amazing content as well. And there are tons and tons of other spaces. Skillshare. I know some of that is paid, but they also have like promotions where you can do like a free trial. And then there's places, where else could you do? Creative Live, where they have some really nice videos where you can learn not just about social media, but how to create content in different forms and mediums. Yeah, so there's lots of places. Also YouTube. Literally go onto YouTube and search how to run your social media, and you'll find tons of different people who can give you lots of free advice. So that's where I'd say you start. Maybe find someone who you're interested in maybe working with, and most of these people tend to have free content. Consume that. Also, you could reach out to people in the DM. Some people are helpful and they'll be like, look, I'm having a free masterclass. You're more than welcome to join, or I have some free resources that you can, be part of. Also being part of groups, like Facebook groups where people share a lot of this insight and you can grow and learn from other people.
If somebody, like, for instance, let's say I'm like an up and coming like DJ, and then now I know an up and coming Olivia, like somebody who's doing their digital marketing, when we're just kind of coming up in the same thing. But then I don't have money to pay Olivia right now. How do you think I should approach Olivia? Is that a thing I should do? Or should I just say, let me just kind of do my free courses? Or if I feel like maybe Olivia and I can really have a thing, how would I go about approaching somebody for that?
I think definitely approach, because if you don't ask, then the answer is always no, right? So I say definitely approach and pitch what it is you want, so you can be very clear. I love what you're doing. I'm wondering if you're willing to help me with AB, whatever. And then you can maybe have something you feel they might be interested in, right? So maybe you're a videographer and or like you're a DJ and maybe they need someone to play a set for them, right? So you could say, this is what I'm willing to offer you. Would you be open? And then you can come up with a barter, because they might actually be interested in what you do. They could also say no, but that's okay, because at least you've asked and they know you exist. That's what I always say. And they might be able to point you to another direction. Maybe they know someone else who can offer you what it is that you want. But yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for us to reach out, to collaborate with people in our industry, outside our industry, because that's how we're going to grow. Yeah.
What do you think are the most kind of the most interesting unknown things that people don't realize about social media? Because you've just talked about WhatsApp stories, and like I know a lot of people who think WhatsApp stories are slightly tacky, but it appears that WhatsApp for business, they're really working.
Yeah.
So what are these things that are really working for people, but people don't really know? Like, you imagine your traditional kind of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, maybe your stories, maybe a TikTok if you're one of those people.
Yeah.
But then what are these other little corners of things that are working and nobody knows?
I think actually to hone in on TikTok, right? So there are lots of people who are thriving on TikTok, and it's not about even having 1 million followers. It's just about having something to say. And there's a wide age range there. So a lot of people think it's only for Gen Z, or people are a lot younger, but there are a lot of people who are on TikTok. So I think the main thing I've found with TikTok is you don't have to do the dance videos or do the stuff that's viral, because a lot of people are like with Reels and TikTok, they're like, but I don't know how to do that. I don't have those amazing transitions. The thing is, we all come to these platforms for different things. Some for entertainment, some for education, some to learn something. So I would say, especially with TikTok, I found like there's a lot of space for people to create content that will reach a wider audience than even any other social media platform. Their algorithm is really, really friendly. Also, they only have one feed, right? So for the others, say Facebook or Instagram, you have multiple feeds. You have IGTV, Reels. But with TikTok, there's only one feed, and you literally can be scrolling for hours and you discover so many people. So TikTok is worth investing in. I would say if you're not yet comfortable being on TikTok, just go and consume the content and see what sort of content you connect with, and then see maybe which type of content would work well for your brand. You could look at other people who are in a similar industry and start creating content that's inspired. You don't have to copy, but inspired by what they do. Yeah, so TikTok. Where else would I say? Actually, there's YouTube Shorts that just recently came out. So it's basically...
Is YouTube Shorts a thing?
I think it's slowly growing. The beauty of starting or when things are new, it's if you're able to test them out, because then you create a niche for yourself, and it's easier when you're one of the first than when you're kind of coming in when everybody else has discovered it and basically wants to go viral on there. So I think YouTube Short is actually growing. I still feel it's quite new. But then I think that there's space for that to be quite interesting, because I feel like what happens, or what I found, is that the different platforms that are coming up, or different spaces, are making people more creative. So before, video transitions or editing used to be just simple, right? But now, because of Reels and TikTok, there are all these amazing transitions that people are doing, and different things that we weren't seeing before. So I feel when these things come up, they inspire us to create differently. So I think YouTube Short is definitely something worth looking into, especially if you're thinking, how can I get onto YouTube without having to create like something too long? I love it because I've been able to post stuff off my phone. Most of the times I'm like, should I go on YouTube? It's not as high quality as I'd like, but it's basically removed that fear, because I'm like, I can post a short, it's fine. What else? I think those are the main ones that I would say that people should look out for. But I think on every platform, there's definitely a way for you to find a niche for yourself, even if it's been there for a couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, like, maybe I'm in the position as the DJ that I can afford an Olivia.
Yes.
Right. I can afford the services of somebody who can really work with my socials. How do I know? Because there's a lot of people offering this service, right? And definitely some of them are going to be scammers. How do I know I've picked a good social media manager?
So the first thing I would say is, when you're picking a social media manager, it's good to pick someone who's worked in your industry. So if they've done entertainment before, if they're an entertainer and they're also doing social media management, because each industry is very different. And yes, you could have experience in quite a number of industries, but it's best when you find someone who has a niche in your industry, because they're going to understand the nuance, right? When you're in entertainment, there are different things that are different to, say, if you're in medicine. And even the terminology and the things you need to know. So first thing is, do they niche in what you do, or at least have experience? If not, but you still connect to them, I would say, the second thing is, how are they to work with? So obviously you might not know immediately, but in terms of like personality, when you were communicating with them in the initial stages, how quick were they to respond? Did they take like 2-3 weeks to respond to your email? Maybe when you brought up a suggestion, were they open to it? I would say there's a lot of like those little things that make a big difference. And then the third thing is, in terms of how they work, have they worked with a company of your size? Because sometimes people who are not used to working with small businesses have an expectation of big business for a small business. So that's really important. And then I think that the last thing is really just be open to trying, because it's almost like you might meet someone, all these things check out, but then when you work with them, the energy or the things just don't go the way you expect. So just be open to trying until you find the right fit, because that tends to happen quite a bit. So yeah, I think that's what I would recommend.
I think one of the things that people are learning more and more these days is that digital space, like any other space, is owned space, right? And so this idea that you put a post and everybody in the world can see it, yes, it's true to some extent, but it's not 1,000% true.
Yes.
Because algorithms decide where your things go, and that then a thing like an ad will come along, and like paying for an ad then means that your thing can be seen by certain types of people in certain ways at certain times. And so how do you kind of talk to people who feel like doing social media ads is cheating? Like, I'm not building an organic following. And if I do ads, so how do you get people to be more open towards doing ads?
I think what I would actually do is point them to traditional media. When you pay for a billboard, is that cheating? You're putting yourself in a space where more people can see you. Same thing with a TV ad. You have more access to a wider audience. So I would equate it to the same thing. You're basically just getting access to a wider audience, and maybe even a more specific niched audience, which is great for you, because again, you could have 1 million followers, but if all those 1 million followers, only 5,000 of them are the ones that actually convert, then it doesn't make a difference. But if you do ads and you can actually give it to people who will convert, then that makes a difference. So I think the first thing is to help people see, it's not cheating, it's just basically giving you access to a wider audience. But the thing is, you have to combine both the advertising and the organic. So once you've got these people, you have to keep them, right? So you need to create content consistently that will engage them. And that's what a lot of people forget. They run these amazing adverts, they get all these people following them, and then they forget about them. So even once you have the audience, you need to nurture the audience. You need to give them something that will make them stay. So thinking about the content you have, is it connecting with your audience? And one of the key things that's really great about social media or digital media, you can ask people and you'll get pretty much an immediate response. So are you connecting with this type of content? You can see how they're interacting with things. So ask your audience. They're there and they actually want to talk to you.
Let's talk about this conversion, because you've talked about converting a lot. And a lot of times people will think that conversion means they came and they bought a thing, but that's not necessarily it. Sometimes a conversion could actually mean somebody moved from being someone who just scrolls to someone who likes.
Yes.
You've moved someone who likes to somebody who will comment, and things like that. And so maybe you could talk about how important it is, even if you're not necessarily, from an audience perspective, even if you're not necessarily going to buy a product, what do your likes and your comments do for a brand?
Yeah, I think that's such an important point because, yeah, at the end of the day, people are like, oh, I didn't sell, but you maybe did something else that's even greater. Maybe people bought into your brand in terms of they believe in what you're doing. And I think what's really important is sometimes people are not buying not because they don't like, maybe their budget just doesn't allow, but they've saved it and they're like, I'm coming back. So when it comes to like the likes and the comments, it shows.
And even saved posts.
Yes.
Because Instagram can show you who is saving your posts.
Exactly. Saved posts actually is one of the best because they cared enough to save it. Like it's a reference point for something. Maybe they like the style, or maybe they're actually coming back to buy. Like when I want to buy things from Instagram stores, I save. And I'm like, okay, when I'm in the store, I'll point to the dress and I'll be like, this is what I want to buy. So when it comes to likes and comments, the really important thing to note is people have engaged on one level. So liking is like the first level. Like it's very easy to like. You can like and scroll. But when you comment, that's like the second level, meaning you took the extra minute to actually leave your opinion or express something. So it made you want to express something. So I would say that's like the second level of conversion. If you saved it or shared it, that means you've now taken to the next level. You actually want it to kind of be in your life, because that means you're willing to stand by whatever message they're saying or maybe critique the message they're saying. And then if you've saved it, it's basically, I want to refer back to it at some point in time, or you found the information useful. So when you think of all those stages, you can kind of think of it as different levels of conversion. Yeah.
And does this even work even for people who they're not saving it because they like it, like they want to hate on your product, or the comment is a bad one? Does it, from an algorithmic perspective, is it the same? Does it just mean that your footprint is still wide?
Yeah.
It's just wide from this other side.
Yes. At the end of the day, I think I've heard someone say, well, you could be putting hate comments or whatever, you're still giving me traffic because you're there. So yes, it is unfortunate when people spend time to spread negativity, because you could literally just scroll over and go to something you prefer. But yes, the algorithm will not be like, unless it becomes really vicious, and then they will probably pick it up. The community people pick it up and be like, okay, we need to check up what's happening with this post. Yeah.
I think it would be interesting to talk about customer care and like client services.
Yes.
On the side of social media, because like there's some people who you can do your content really well, your feed is gorgeous, maybe you even have an aesthetic so people can see, like there's a gradient, you started off baby blue and then now you're in another color, your backgrounds, whatever. But then like now when it comes to responding to comments or responding to DMs, there's a bit of a gap there. So how do you advise people to bridge that gap?
I think I actually say, even as we're starting with social media, even before we start with social media, I encourage people, make sure your product or your service is well put together, because it doesn't matter how well you market.
Wait, so you're saying that actually the putting together of the product also includes how you deal with the customers?
Absolutely.
Even before you go on social?
Absolutely. Because here's the thing. Say, for instance, you run this amazing promotion, but you don't know how you're going to deliver things. Or you don't have someone who's going to pick your phone, it's you, but you're running in meetings. That's a wasted promotion, because you're going to get the traffic, but you will not convert. So I always advise people, think of your systems as well. Many times people think they're not making money, but they actually are. One, maybe they don't even have their account, so they don't even know how much money they're making. Two, people have been calling you, but you're not picking up, or the number you have, no one is picking up, or the person who's picking up it's just not for the phone. Like, they don't have telephone.
They're not for the phone.
It does not. Like, maybe that's not their strength. You need somebody else. So I think it's important to the people who are answering your communication, be it email, be it the phone, be it via DMs, need to be people who that is their strength. When people ask you a question, they will respond and you have the right information. So for instance, it's very frustrating. I'm sure many people have experienced this. You go into someone's DM, you ask them for a price for something, they take you around in circles, or you're asking, is this product available? And then they don't respond. So say, for instance, something isn't available. You should know that there's an alternative, or tell them, can I get your contact details? When it's back in stock, we'll get back in touch with you. I think when people go online, they almost forget like the face-to-face. Like if you were in a shop, you would do most of these steps, right? You'd say, no, it's not in stock. Can we get your contact details, or it will be back in stock? I think when people go on social media, they forget the same etiquette, and you need to bring the same etiquette when you're handling people online. So I think, yeah, it's really important when you're communicating with your clients, whether they're happy or sad, be professional, be respectful, and remember that I found that when things go wrong is actually when you can convert a client even more. So how you deal with a very difficult situation can make a client go, I didn't like how that worked, but the way you dealt with this difficult situation has made me want to like your brand even more. So it's not just always when things are going well. But I think the key thing is communication. If something is happening, keep your client updated. If you said you deliver at 8 and then suddenly things have delayed, let them know, because they could have been pinning their time and schedule on that thing. Maybe they stayed home for you and then you didn't show up and messed everything in terms of their schedule. So I think communication is the first thing, communicating when things are going well and when things are not going well.
I think there's a thing you've said about especially when things are going wrong, because a lot of times people really get antsy about that. And then, like, remember we were talking about shame.
Yes.
So sometimes it'll be shame that'll, keep you away. You don't want to talk. You want to talk when you've brought the thing.
Exactly.
Right? And then now you're coming with, even me, I had problems. But that's not what the client wanted to hear.
No, they don't. Because the way I've found is if you're going through something, people are human and most people will be open to understand. But what's frustrating is when you're reaching out to someone, they're not picking up their phone, you can't reach them. So then you wonder, say for instance, you've paid for something, have they now run away with my money? What am I going to do? Like, worst case scenario. And then you make the person panic. But if you approach them and say, we hear you, we're just having a bit of difficulty, we are sorry, we understand that this is not ideal, but we will be in touch with you. Keeping people updated can reduce the amount of anger or frustration people have, because they know, okay, at least I know they're working on something. And yeah, I know that it is, some people have different ways of dealing with difficult situations. Some people run away, they don't address, other people will address. So I think it's trying to think of it as, put yourself in that person's position. If you were the customer, how would you like someone to deal with you? You would like to know an update. And then thinking of that way changes things, because many times I feel people forget that they're also customers, right? That you also want to be treated a certain way. So remember that even when you're dealing with a client who's extremely upset or when things haven't gone so well.
Okay. I think another conversion that a lot of people don't usually talk about is the turning a one-time customer into a repeat customer. And so what have you found works with regard to going back to people who've already bought from you, which means they already pretty much understand something from how you work. They pretty much like your product if they bought it. Even if they bought it out of hate, they bought it.
Yes.
So how do you, what kind of advertising, what kind of targeted, because this is not taking somebody from zero to now you know my brand. This is come back.
Yes.
So what's the difference in what different ways would you advise somebody to market in that sense?
So I think one of the key things to do even when you're converting people is keep them in mind to check up on them. So I actually do that when I do my consultations with people. I always say I'm going to check up on you in a month or 2 weeks or whenever, because then you're sure to see, like, it basically helps you reconvert them again. Because most times people buy something, they like it, and then maybe they forgot where they bought it from or whatever. But then if you reach out and say, hey, you bought something from us, how did it go? Did you enjoy it? One, it shows that you cared enough to ask, and people might go, I really loved it and I actually want more, and can you do something else? So I think just following up is one of the first things I'd say. Check up on a client. Did they enjoy it? Did they like it? Did they have an issue with it? That's one of the first things, just checking up on a client. Two, if they liked a specific range of product, keep that in mind, because if you expand that range of product, you could tell them about it. So those are two main things I would say you could do. But then keeping them in your circle. right? So even if you're, say, a makeup artist who only does bridal, the thing is, if they really liked you so much, they might say, well, when I'm having like my baby and I want to have like a photo session, I still want you to do my makeup because I had a great experience. So for someone like you, keep in touch and check up, how did things go? So I think it's just keeping communication and sharing with them, keeping them in your family, not forgetting the people who bought from you. Because I think a lot of times, we're always going for new clients and we forget the people who have bought from us. So I think it's just nurturing that relationship. And even if they never buy from you again, guess what? They'll refer someone else and they'll say, there's this amazing person who did this for me. I think you should, check out their services.
How can you kind of what can you use your clients for? And maybe use is the wrong word. But with regard to asking them questions about how you can do things better or how they learnt about you, what do you think is a good way of doing that? Because sometimes people don't want to answer a questionnaire, a thing that was sent through whatever, that sort of thing. People don't want.
No.
But then how do you think you can use the kind of customer exchange as a way of getting some of that information that you need that can be useful for you to make your plans later?
I think one of the quick, easy ways is if, say, you're on Instagram or a platform that allows you to do polls or Q&A, you could do it that way. I find polls work because it's a yes and no and people don't have to think much. So you could run a really simple poll and ask people like, did you like this? Or how was your experience? So that's one way. Making it very easy for people to respond. Also making it in a space where you can ask people for their opinion and you could give them the option of, some people don't like to comment on posts. So you could say you could comment or send a DM. So also giving the option of being able to give a public response or private response. So some people want to share their opinion, but they just don't want the rest of the world to know. So also giving people that option. And then maybe even like doing something simple like picking up the phone and calling people and just asking them, are you open? Do you have a few minutes? Can I ask you your opinion on this? And then the really important thing is, if you action or whatever you action, give them feedback. Because of them, this is what you did. Because a lot of times we take from the customer, we get the update, but then we don't tell them what we did with the information. So if, say, I find out that people prefer a certain medium of me communicating, and I decide to change because of that, it's great if I acknowledge that it's because of their feedback that I did that, because it will encourage other people to give me feedback, because it shows that I actually paid attention to their feedback and I did something. So I think it's also important, not just in the process of collection, but also giving like a response. This is what we did with what you shared with us. Yeah.
Okay. Earlier on, we were talking about the phenomenon that is DM for prices.
Yes.
And why, from your perspective as an expert in the field, you feel like DM for prices is a black hole of nothing. So could you tell us about why for you DM for prices doesn't work? I know for me as a client, I hate it. But then like from your perspective, how would you tell somebody who currently really lives in the world of DM for prices to just start putting your prices on your posts or something?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I'll say I do understand why some people do it, because for some people's service offering or products, it's customized, which means depending on what you want, the price will differ. But if you're in that space, then you say you can give a price range. You can say starting from, or, so people can have an idea and say that it's subject to change based on what you pick. Now, the thing is, a lot of people forget that they are also customers, right? So, for instance, I like to give this scenario. Say you walked into a store and there were no prices anywhere. Let's say Quick Mart or a supermarket, any supermarket, and you had to ask for every single price. Like, you want milk, you have to ask the cashier or the salesperson, how much is this? Like, how frustrating would that be for you? The thing is, people want to know the price so they can make an informed decision, so that when they're sending you a DM, it's more for interest rather than now having to have this full conversation. So I think about your customer and their thought process. They want to know the price so they can make a decision. Also, for you, it saves you a lot of time. Instead of you having to respond to everybody who's asked about prices, the price is there. So when they come in, they're like, oh, this is 3,000 or whatever it is. Do you have it in this color? So now you're just answering logistical questions like, do you have it in this color? Can you deliver? And things like that. It also takes away a lot of your work, because now you have people who are in your DMs, hopefully, who are interested in what it is you want to sell or you're giving them. So I think it's not just about you, it's also about what the customer prefers. And then I think the last thing is I'd ask people, what are you afraid of? Because I feel a lot of people make these decisions based on fear. Maybe they're like, if I put the price, it might be too expensive, or people will perceive me a certain way. The thing is, people who are your clients, that price will work for them. Or even if it doesn't, they'll save up for it, or they'll figure out a way.
Or maybe they might even enter your DMs and say,
Yeah.
can I pay in installments?
Exactly. Maybe you can come up with a payment plan for them. So I think there are many reasons why people do it, but I really would encourage people, do your best to be transparent with your prices. It really does save everyone a lot of time. And obviously you might have your reasons. So if you do have, maybe try and explain so that people understand, the reason I'm not putting the price is maybe it's seasonal, right? And it changes. So you say, in this season, it's going to be this amount. So if my price changes in a future post, this is perfect. This is possibly why.
I think maybe my last question for you will actually be about, it's the second last, will be about the ways in which your work kind of has to overlap with PR. And we've seen a lot of brands do major snaffles, like it just goes bad. You do one bad post, even if you delete it, screenshots last forever, or you say a thing and then now because of pride or something, you just want to double down. Like you are right, and then now everybody is now casting all of the things that you've done into question. So like now when you're having to start again after a moment like that, or like maybe let's say you're a bridal wear designer, and I'm saying bridal wear because there's actually a bridal wear designer I saw, somebody was saying this about them, that they only do bridal wear well for very important clients. Yeah, and then now everybody else just has shenanigans. Now, if a client came to you at that point in time, like, how do I mend this? What do you do? Because like now it's like you've had like an overflow of bad publicities, like someone came and vomited all over your socials. So how do you start kind of mending from a time like that?
I think the first thing I do is it's not even online. We have to go offline. So I know I used to work for different people, and whenever something like that would happen, I would actually call the office or the space and be like, give me the breakdown of exactly what happened so we can come up with a solution. It's important to understand. So why did that happen? Because when you're going online, you don't want to go with like a fake apology. You want the systems to actually change, because the worst thing is you apologize and the same thing happens again. So I normally will ask the client, okay, why is this actually happening, right? If it is happening, are you willing to change? Because if you're not, then what we're doing online is just going to be a band-aid. So the first thing is, let's figure out the offline so that can actually change. You really need to start treating people differently so that when we do go online and say, we are really sorry and things are changing, things are actually changing. Because I feel like digital and it needs to work hand in hand. What you're doing directly to your clients and what you're saying online has to merge. Otherwise, it's not going to make much sense. So that's the first thing. We figure out how things can change in the physical space.
And then actually you've raised an important point, because half the time the reason somebody brought a complaint online is because they couldn't see a way of reaching you in the space where the mistake was made.
Yes.
And so reaching them in that space also kind of neutralizes them so that they don't come after your apology and said, this person still did, and then now the whole situation begins again.
Yeah, so it's important to acknowledge, and then also for communication, because I found a lot of times it's communication. I've seen like big brands, like something wasn't sorted, but the person running their socials comes and says, oh, it's been fixed. And it wasn't. So it's really important to find out, has it been fixed or is it in the process of being fixed? Then communicate that. Acknowledging the mistake you've made is really important. It is difficult, but it's better for you to say, look, we understand that we have messed up and we are sorry and we are asking you for grace so that we have time to correct it. Starting from that space is really important. Not everyone is going to be appeased, but it's important to say that. The second thing is to acknowledge people are upset and they want to be heard. So you could, contact the people who are commenting and say, we hear you. Is it possible for us to actually directly reach out to you and we have a conversation? Maybe we can figure out a way we can be better by you telling us what happened, and then actually following up and doing that conversation, because it's all very well to do it publicly. We're going to reach out to you and then nobody calls again. You're going to cause an issue. So I think acknowledging the mistake that's been done, say you're actually doing something about it, and then actually do something about it, and then use that as a, maybe even get those people who went through a bad experience and give them, if it's possible, another experience with your brand, and following up, and then getting them to talk about that experience. As I said, if someone has had a really bad experience with you, but then you're able to handle it in a way that, is kind, they'll remember, because they know I was really upset, but the way you dealt with me was really calm and kind. So maybe I do want to give you another chance.
Okay. I think maybe the last kind of businessy question will be about small businesses and the ways in which they can work with influencers, because sometimes there's a lot of debate about, I'm too small of a business, I wouldn't necessarily be able to work with an influencer, or there's some small businesses that have really thrived because of their interaction with certain types of influencers. And so what kind of advice would you give a small business that's thinking, should I work with influencers or not? And also not to not to hate on influencers if you don't want to work on them, because it's also a job.
Yes,
and influencers do a lot of incredible work.
They do.
And so like now, as a small business owner or somebody who has this product or this service that you want to sell, how do you advise them to think around beginning to approach or think about working with influencers?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think it's important for people to be more open to working with influencers. I do have to say that you need to pick wisely when it comes to influencers, because again, they have specialties. So some are more in beauty, some more in fashion, food. So the first thing I would tell a small business owner is that most of us are actually following influencers, like in our personal lives. So is there an influencer that you follow, that you connect with what they're doing and they actually align with your brand? So maybe you're a fashion brand and there's a fashion influencer that you follow. That's the first step. Look for an influencer who's in your field, right? That is very important. Again, niching down is really important. Don't go for someone who's not in your industry, and it's best not to. There are some people who do lots of different influencing niches, so that's fine. But it's important, if you're starting out, go for someone who's specifically in your industry. Second thing is to think about, if as you're consuming their content, have you ever felt like you're convinced to buy? Or have you ever engaged? Right? Of course, we're all different. So maybe you're not, but someone else is. But the first litmus test is that. Maybe there was something and you're like, oh my God, I wish I could buy it. So that's a good indicator. And then the third thing is the type of content they create. So they could be in your niche and maybe you're influenced to buy, but the type of content they create is not really what you're looking for at that point in time. So maybe they're not the specific influencer for you. But those things should help you decide whether that's an influencer you should approach or not. And then now when you're approaching the influencer, there are a couple of things to think about. Maybe they have rates or different packages, so you could inquire about that. If none of them work, you could propose and say, maybe this doesn't work, but can I try this and that? And you can come up with maybe something that works for you. And then the last thing is to be clear on your expectations. And hopefully the influencer will also tell you, yes, it's possible or not. Because say, for instance, you want to sell, 10,000 worth of a specific product. The influencer should be in a position to tell you, yes, it's possible, or probably not. Maybe what I can bring you is awareness and interest. Conversions might come later. So it's important to have that conversation, because if you don't, a lot of times I feel the disappointment comes when expectations were not expressed both ways, and it wasn't clear what the deliverables were. So if you want them to post on the main feed or Insta stories, however many times, it needs to be said and it needs to be written, and both of you have to agree. You cannot assume that it's going to happen, because that's why I feel many things now, then that causes a lot of issues. And then also understanding that the influencer has their own platform, they've developed their own audience. So there's certain things they might not be willing to do because it's their brand as well, right? It's their audience that they've developed. So it's a collaboration. It's not just because you're paying that they have to do everything you say. They've developed an audience that you want to tap into. So I think it's important for that to be clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think maybe the last question will be, what's exciting now for you about small kind of creative businesses or people who are coming up in creative practice and their social media possibilities?
I think what's really exciting right now is people are starting to create content that they love and that is authentic to them. There's so many different
So it's not like
styles.
performed.
No,
Okay.
I feel people are more open to being themselves and to trying new projects and experiences. I feel like people are starting to feel like the social media space can be more accepting, can be more open. So I'm excited to see how different people are interacting. And there's a lot more collaboration that's happening, which I really, really love, especially within the continent, which for me is my passion. I'm like, I love to see Africans working together. So yeah, I think that's what's really exciting right now.
That's amazing, Olivia. Thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Have a lovely day.
Thank you.